This Sunday, we are kicking off, as we said, a 6-week series called Rooted, exploring our Methodist origins. Over the next few Sundays, we'll explore the beginnings and values of Methodism so that we might become a little bit more familiar with our Methodist DNA. In your bulletin, I have included an insert that will be used by the confirmation class throughout this series, but I thought some of you might want to use that as well. I should say that on question F, it dropped off, so there's no place to write your answer, so you get an automatic pass on that question. A couple other preliminary remarks. Number one, this series is not to demonstrate how our brand of Christianity is better than other Christian brands. I do think there are many commendable things about our denomination, but as we will soon see, our particular denomination, our brand, has been willing to adapt and adopt from a variety of other sources. Secondly, I will not advocate for a return to traditional Methodism, mainly because I doubt that we could arrive on any agreement about what traditional Methodism is. Nonetheless, as we explore our heritage, I think we might hear some things that might help us reroot ourselves in some of the good soil of our heritage as we seek to walk faithfully into God's redeeming future. And I really think that historians on this would agree that our founder, John Wesley, was interested in helping form disciples who would walk faithfully into God's redeeming future. He called it practical divinity, and we'll hear more about that in the coming weeks. John Wesley himself was born in 1703. He was the 15th of 19 children born to Samuel and Susanna Wesley in Epworth, England. 10 of those 19 Wesley children died in infancy. John's father, Samuel, was a parish priest in the Church of England. And there are a couple things that are notable about Samuel. First, he did not manage money very well. And on at least one occasion, he landed in debtor's prison. Second, Samuel's parishioners felt that he was far too strict, and they showed their contempt for him by injuring his animals, destroying his crops, and setting fire to the rectory, the home where the Wesley family lived. Not once, but twice. John, who was 5 years old at the time of the second fire, was rescued by his neighbors just before that house, the burning house, caved in. And ever after, John would see himself as, quote, a brand plucked from the fire. And that comes from Zechariah chapter 3, verse 2. And John would return to that phrase several times throughout his life when he was passing through difficult circumstances that might affect his relationship with God. Of his two parents, his mother seems to have been the more stable. Unlike many women of this period, Susanna was extremely well-read and often would conduct the prayer meetings for the church when her husband was absent, like in debtor's prison. In fact, more people would come when Susanna was leading the prayer meetings than when Samuel led the prayer meetings. And as he grew up, it was Susanna, his mother, that nurtured John Wesley's love of the Bible. When he was 17 years old, John went to attend Oxford University. And following his studies there, he apprenticed in ministry under his father. John was ordained in the Church of England in 1728, and 1 year later, his younger brother, his teenage brother, Charles, asked John if he would lead a group of Oxford freshmen who were spiritually hungry. Charles and his friends were all teenagers. So it is not a mistake to see that at our various earliest stages, our denominational roots were because of ardent teenagers. Because John was impressed with the pattern of life that existed among the earliest Christian community, the primitive Christianity, he began leading that group in prayer, in Bible study, in fasting, and receiving communion, which are works of piety, works of drawing closer to God, but also in works of mercy, such as visiting prisoners and caring for the poor. This group of Methodist teenagers was so rigorous in their discipleship quest that other students tended to have derisive names for the group. One of them was the Bible Moths. Another one was the Holy Club, but that was said with a sneer, kind of like the Holier Than Thou Club. The other one was the Methodists, because they did seem to have a method for everything that they were doing, but Methodist was not originally a positive term. Even so, and in spite of his rigorous efforts to be a good Christian, John had this nagging feeling that he was not doing enough to be pleasing to God. And so in 1735, a few decades before the American Revolution, when he was 32 years old, John and his younger brother Charles signed up to be missionaries to the New World. And they went to a colony known as Georgia. John had three main objectives for being a missionary. First, he wanted to minister to the colonists of the New World. Second, he wanted to convert Native Americans to Christianity. And third, he wanted to gain a sense that God really did love him. Now, take a minute to consider that. John Wesley was leading the Oxford group. He was fasting, and he was serving the poor and the imprisoned, and he was already ordained. But he still was not sure if God loved him. Now, there are some really interesting and entertaining stories about John's endeavors in Georgia. But the bottom line is this: he was a spectacular failure. On January 24, 1738, on his return voyage to England, and it seems as if he needed to leave Georgia before he was arrested. I won't get into that. But he wrote this in his journal. He said, "I went to America to convert Indians, but oh, who shall convert me? Who is he that will deliver me from this heart of unbelief? I have a fair summer religion. I can talk well, nay, I can even believe myself. Well, no danger is near. But let death look me in the face, and my spirit is troubled. So in the ensuing months, back in England, John went through a deep depression. And at one point, he traveled to Germany to speak with Peter Böhler, who was a Moravian pastor who had been on the voyage to the Americas with John and his brother. And John told Peter Böhler that he wasn't sure he can continue being a preacher, couldn't continue preaching the gospel, but he wasn't sure that he himself was really a Christian. And so John asked Peter Böhler if he should stop preaching altogether. And John wrote about the exchange in his journal, and he wrote this: I asked Böhler if he thought I should stop or not. He answered, by no means. I asked, but what can I preach? Böhler said, preach faith until you have it, and then, because you have it, you will preach faith. Now, I love that. I love that when we think about people, our own struggles, perhaps our own doubts and questions of faith. Kind of reminds me of the slogan, fake it till you make it. And that's not a slogan to be inauthentic. It's just that Wesley really loved God. He just didn't feel that he was faithful enough. So fake it till you make it. As John considered his spiritual journey, he realized that even when he first gave his heart to God as a teenager, he based his entire faith on actions, thinking that the more he did, the more God would reveal his love. And yet, in spite of his efforts, he felt he never really measured up. And John realized that more than anything, he simply wanted to trust Christ. And so on May 24th, 1738, still struggling, he ended up at a small group meeting in London. And here is how John Wesley describes this pivotal moment in his life and in the life of our denomination. I love the first one. In the evening, I went very unwillingly. Any of you struggle to get to church on Sunday morning? John struggled. And said, I went very unwillingly to a Moravian society on Aldersgate Street, where one of the readings was Martin Luther's preface to the Epistle on the Romans. About 9:15, this is in the evening, while describing the change which God works in the heart through faith in Christ, I felt my heart strangely warmed. I felt I did trust Christ alone for salvation, and an assurance was given me that he had taken away my sins, even mine. Our scripture reading from Romans this morning is the passage that John and the Moravians were studying that night. But let's consider just for a moment the seminal moment in the life of our denomination. The Methodist denomination was born when an Anglican priest was listening to the reading of a Lutheran document while attending a gathering of Moravians. So remember what I said earlier. It's in our DNA to respect other traditions and to adapt and adopt what we find to be true and life-giving. This Aldersgate experience was the turning point. John realized that personal holiness could not be achieved by his efforts, but it was a gift, a gracious gift of God. And he saw that there's not anything we can do that will make us pure enough to approach and please a good and holy God. Rather, it's what God has done for and continues to do in us. So to put it succinctly, John's motivations changed at Aldersgate. Before Aldersgate, his desire was to earn God's love. But after Aldersgate, his efforts were to respond to God's love. We have a lot more to learn throughout this series, but I just thought that Wesley's story offers us some good questions to ponder. One of them, could our faith be described, as John says, as a fair summer religion that withers at the first sign of challenge or discomfort? Second, what does it mean to practice faith until we have it? Do you think we can practice our faith even when we're uncertain of our faith? And then finally, what motivation is driving our discipleship? Is it a desire to earn God's favor, to prove to God and others that we're good enough? Or is it to respond to God's love? So I think that's a good place to end, but next week we're going to look at some of the early methods of Methodism as it developed following John Wesley's Aldersgate experience. But I hope you'll ponder those three questions. If you'd like to talk about them, I don't know how cool it's going to be. Maybe it'll be a brief discussion. But in about 20 minutes after the service, I'll be in the Wesley Hall, and we could have a discussion. Or you might want to just talk about them around your table in the social hall. But I think it's worth reflecting on, and so I invite you to do so.